Thanks for coming. My name's Neil Perry, and today in this webinar I'm going to be running through an installation of Rsync and show you how easy it is to set up an offsite backup using Rsync with BackupAssist. Just before I delve into the actual demonstration, I just wanted to quickly go over what Rsync is, just in case this is completely new to you and you haven't seen the software at all. Rsync is a feature and an add-on for BackupAssist, which allows you to do very efficient off-site backups of files and folders, large selections of files and folders and applications as well. So it's not really designed for moving huge files. It's not something that will do a bare metal backup offsite, but it will allow you to back up a large folder of many hundreds and thousands of files up to, I think of it as sort of suitable for up to sort of a 1 GB size files, that sort of file structure. It's based on block level changes, so rather than just copying a file if the file has changed at all, it copies the parts of that file that have changed. So there is a time where it will analyze files for changes and look for which blocks of those files have changed and just move those parts of files that have changed. As well as that ability to only move small amounts of data within files, it also compresses all of the binary data on the fly between BackupAssist, the Rsync client, and the remote Rsync server. So what that means is it gets the best use out of your potentially lower bandwidth connection over the internet to a remote server. Just like any other file protection job within BackupAssist, there's two modes of operation. There's a mirror, where you just mirror a file system and update it on the Rsync server, and every time that job runs, the same data is overwritten. So there's no history there. It just overwrites the data and keeps that remote copy of files in exact mirror to the source. And also there is the option to use a backup with history, where you choose a different scheme for keeping, let's say, a week's worth of data, or even extend that to weeklies and monthlies. You can have a grandfather, father-son type scenario. We'll probably, when we go through the demo, pick one of those schemes to give you a little bit more of an example. Rsync is able to back up open files through the Microsoft VSS engine. So whereas I'm thinking about backing up files and folders, that can include applications, but bear in mind that some applications like Exchange or SQL databases have potentially huge files within them. They're not going to necessarily be very suitable for Rsync. The time it would take to scan an Exchange database that's many hundreds of gigabytes in size looking for changes is going to be hours and hours, to then potentially only move maybe a gigabyte of data, but it's going to churn through that file to look for changes. So yes, you can back up open applications, but not particularly huge databases. The initial backup, if you're thinking about pushing data to this remote server, the first time you move all that data, it has to travel in its entirety. Yes, it can get compressed about 2 to 1 on transit, so it's only about half the data, but still potentially a lot of data. So to get around that requirement, there's two operations. The first one is to use a seed function, and that allows you to push the data to a local USB drive and push it to the remote server. Or if you prefer, you can, in certain scenarios, it's possible to move the server into the local network and just, benefit from the very fast local network speeds for that first push of data, and then take it off-site and change the destination within the job. But seeding is very useful if you've got a remote server and you have the ability to move it. The actual connection between BackupAssist running as the Rsync client and the remote Rsync server, there is the option to use SSH for encryption. I tend to recommend this for all solutions, not only because it adds that level of security so the data is encrypted across the wire, but it also proves to be more reliable, and it supports the ability to use single instance store on the destination. I'm not going to go into too much depth on that right now. This is more focused on the Rsync functions, but you'll see as we go through the demo how I choose Rsync over SSH as the primary method. The Rsync server, there is a free Windows Rsync server called Rsync, and this is what we'll be using today. This is linked from the BackupAssist website through the white paper. This is not a piece of software that we sell. It's not something that BackupAssist have developed. It's a third-party open source Rsync server. But it's been proven to run successfully with BackupAssist. We've been using it for years now, and if you follow the guide that I'll go through today, then you should be able to set that up very quickly, totally free of charge. However, we do find that quite a lot of customers like the idea of using NAS devices that support Rsync. So the technology and the way that you set it up is very, very similar. Just obviously in that scenario, it really does depend on which device you have as to exactly what you configure on the NAS box. Generally speaking, because we're doing Rsync over SSH, it's whether that you just log into the NAS over SSH. So if you're looking for a device, look for those that support secure shell, SSH access, and potentially then also have Rsync options built in. QNAP, Netgear, Synology are the three sort of ones that we come across time and time again. So those are the ones to check first. So the demo today is going to be quite straightforward. So I'm going to simulate, there's two servers, a BackupAssist client that will be connecting to a Windows machine running CW Rsync. Again, like I mentioned, this will be all over SSH, so we're just doing one connection, one port, which is port 22. Just keep things simple, in my scenario, both machines are going to be on the local LAN, but this could easily be a remote server on an existing network somewhere across the internet. The only difference will be that I'd be connecting to a public IP address on the remote server. That could easily be behind a NAT translation if you're thinking, well, the server doesn't have a public IP. You're just forwarding port 22 along to the remote Rsync server. But in this scenario, it's going to just be everything's going to be on local IPs. So I'll just switch to the actual the demo machine. Okay. So the first server I have here is running BackupAssist. In fact, I need to come back to that one because the first thing we need to do is set up the actual remote Rsync server. So that, just to point out, that's my machine that's going to be the client that we want to copy data from. Oops. Let's go back. There we go. So this is the machine that's going to be running CW Rsync. I just wanted to point out that if you haven't already, that's the URL to the Rsync white paper where all of these instructions are defined, and there's also a really good explanation of how Rsync works. So following those instructions, what I've downloaded is two installers. There's the CW Rsync service itself, which provides the Rsync server, provides you a connection point for receiving Rsync requests, and also the CopSSH installer, which is effectively the SSH server that you're connecting to. So the process is to install the CW Rsync first. So I'll just get this running through. Pretty much we're going to keep everything as default, so it's just a case of installing into the root path. Bear that in mind, that C program files ICW is important in the future. Now you often find this that it already says, oh, there's a base installation of the ICW, the Linux CYG Win component. So if it comes up with this prompt, that's fine. We're just going to upgrade to the latest version. Okay, I've got a problem already. We'll ignore that one. Oh dear, this is not having fun. Let's do this the wrong way around. I think my machine's not been reverted far enough. Okay, we'll run the CopSSH server first. Okay, well this is something I often come across, but it shouldn't be on this machine because I did do a fresh install. But what I'll have to do is actually remove the previous install, which is a bit unusual because I did revert this virtual machine earlier. Live demos never are fun because of this, usually for this reason. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to remove the ICW folder, which may complain about permissions. Yeah, this is a problem. got a half installation here, so well, this is an extra demo of what to do if you've broken your Rsync installation. Okay, so let's remove all this. Yeah, why on earth is that already installed? Yeah, it's already gone. It's already gone. There we go. Well, just to be sure, let's see if we can now delete this folder. Right, great. So that should be gone. And I just want to check, because this would suggest that we've potentially got some users' accounts in here that we shouldn't have. There we go. Yeah, these shouldn't be here. These are going to be created in a minute. Oh, not the password. Delete the account. Yeah, this is it's definitely not been reverted, this VM. Sorry about that. Definitely thought I'd done that this morning. Okay, so we should be back to a clean system now. Let's try again. Okay, so fresh server with just the installers on. So I'll run through the Rsync server first. Default location. There we go, that's better. So what it's going to do is create a user for running the Rsync service. I tend to leave this alone. You can change the password, but you have to remember to then go and change it in the service account. So unless you particularly aren't happy with a randomly generated password, I'd leave this as default. Excellent. So that's Rsync installed. Next, we'll run BackupAssist. Notice it's the same directory, and that's where it potentially will do an update of certain components. There's the BackupAssist service account. Again, that's going to be used for running just the SSH server. You can change the password, but you have to remember to go and change it in Windows Services. So I'm going to leave it as the default. There you go. So now it's detected that there's a slightly older version. It wants to perform an update on certain components. I have found that if you do these the other way round, you can get in a bit of a pickle with the version. So it's always best to do Rsync first and then BackupAssist. I also tend to have to check the document every time to remind myself which way around that is, but yeah, it's definitely the case. Just taking its time to install the service, and should be there any second. Starting the service. Okay, that's great. So what it's telling me here is that BackupAssist is started, but there's no current Windows users allowed to log in, because SSH is a terminal access into the server, and you have to allow specific Windows users. So we need to create a user and give it access to be able to log in over SSH. So let's do that first. Let's go and create our Windows user. Now, obviously, I'm just using Windows 7 here, but you can use a server platform instead. It's just for myself, it was easier to just use Windows 7. I'm going blind. I need to. Why am I going blind? Manage another account. There we go. Create a new account. So I'm going to create an account called BackupAssist. Now you've got two choices here. I tend to recommend to be everything going to be easy, create it as an administrator. If you're happy to do that and allow this backup assist user full control over this server, that's definitely the easiest way forward. Alternatively, if you create it as a standard user, you have to give it permission to that C program files ICW folder here and all of the subfolders. So I won't do that just now. I'll set it up as an administrator, but if we've got time at the end, we'll come back and we'll try it the other way. So there's my two users that have been created for the services. So we should be all set up on this server now. Oh, so like, just remember there's one more thing we need to do. We've created the user, but we haven't given it access to SSH. So if we actually go into the programs and look for the new CopSSH service, this is the control panel where you define what users are allowed to log in with SSH. So we can see when we start it, this is quite useful to see what's going on as well. The service is running, there's no current connections, there's a little bit of login, probably just saying the service is starting. And you can come back in here later on if you're trying to debug a particular session. But what we need to do is go into the users section, and currently there's no allowed users set up to use CopSSH. So we need to add a user. We go through the little wizard, and we just select the user from the list, BackupAssist, next. It's important to leave it on this option to the access type is Linux shell and SFTP with the three options below. Don't change anything there or you potentially will have problems logging in. And click apply, done. So we're all done there. I'll just leave that on the status window in case we come back. So next let's switch to the BackupAssist server, which is over here. So on this server, what I'm trying to do is I want to copy some data over to that Rsync server. So we'll create a new job. And we're going to do a file protection job. Notice file protection has the option to connect to an Rsync server. We can't use any of the other jobs. It's only file protection that supports Rsync. A bit sluggish. Okay, now it's asking me, because this is a fresh installation of BackupAssist, what user do you want to run BackupAssist as? Now, I'm just going to keep things simple and just use the local system account. But if you're part of a domain, it's definitely a good idea here to define a BackupAssist user locally on this machine or the domain to run your jobs as. So I'm going to select this folder here to backup. Obviously, you can select any folders, but to try and keep these jobs running nice and quick, I've just got a selection of small image files there to backup. And this is where I choose the destination server, and I want to choose an Rsync server. There is this option to connect to an S3 Rsync server. That's if you're connected to the Amazon S3 cloud through a third-party provider called s3rsync.com. This demo doesn't really cover that sort of cloud-based use of the Amazon S3 cloud, but we're just connecting to a generic Rsync server. I'm also not going to choose Rsync encryption at this time. That is an option. If you want to store your data on the remote server encrypted, you can use this option here to encrypt every file first on the BackupAssist machine before it's transmitted across. But I'm going to just leave it unencrypted so it helps see what's been copied. So here's our options for the different schemes. So the default is to just do a mirror and copy what's on the source server over to the destination Rsync server and mirror it. So every time this job runs, the default being at 10 PM, it's just going to update changes. There's no history with this mode. If I delete something on the source server, the equivalent files will be deleted permanently on the destination server. It's just used to have a file mirror of a file system. If we choose basic, then we'll get effectively a 7-day history. Well, by default, a 5-day history, but you can change it to be Monday through to Sunday. Or we can go through and have things like intermediate, where you get a 7-day, so Monday through to Sunday, plus weeks and months and quarters. Go through to professional and have an additional weeklies, individual monthlies and quarterlies, etc. So there's several options here. I won't go through every type, but I think what we'll pick is just basic. So we'll expect a 7-day rotation. So now it wants to ask me some details about the actual Rsync server. So here is where you would normally put in either the public IP address or the DNS name of the remote server. I'm going to be using an internal server, so I can refer to it as the local IP address. 169, but it could equally be, like say, you know, a public IP. It's ideal if you can use a DNS name here, just in case you change things in the future. You haven't got multiple BackupAssist servers potentially you need to suddenly go and change the IP address for. I'm chosen the server type rsync over SSH. That's the default. Don't use rsync daemon over SSH tunnel. That can cause issues. And rsync daemon is not using SSH at all and uses a totally different port. We have seen issues with rsync daemon. That I tend to recommend rsync over SSH where possible. That uses port 22, so bear in mind from your firewall requirements that your remote server, that port has to be visible. The path on the server is the destination server's folder that you want to back up into. Now that has to have rights given to it for the user that we're going to log in with. So we've created a user called BackupAssist. Bear that in mind. If it's not an administrator, you can't write into a folder that that user doesn't have Windows rights on. But we'll just create a folder called C:backup. So on the remote server, I'm expecting it to back it up into the C drive. That's just because on this demo, I don't have a separate drive on the destination server. So this is where I'm going to use that user BackupAssist. And I'm going to try registration with the server. So what it's done now is it's connected to the remote server over SSH, and it's basically saying, oh, this is a new server I've not connected to before, and it's been given a public RSA encryption key that it wants to be added to its own sort of database of known servers. This is how SSH works. You've got a public and a private key, and the remote server's given me its public key, and I will be then transmitting my public key. So both ends can now, from now on, once we've acknowledged that they're allowed to log in, can establish a connection without a password. So all we need to do here is just say, yes, we're happy to continue connecting to this server. Now it's asking me for the password for that BackupAssist user on the remote server. And I've just realized I forgot to give it a password, so before I go any further, I better switch back to that other server and assign it a Windows password. I knew there was one more thing I had to do, because we would fail otherwise. So it's one disadvantage is of using Windows 7. It's possible to create accounts without passwords. So just bear with me while I give it a password. Whoops, hello, what's it doing? There we go. There we go. Sorry about that. So I'll enter that password here. Okay, so it's registered with that remote server. So from now on, BackupAssist doesn't actually need that password. It's stored the public key. So we should be able to now test the connection. So it's connecting to the remote server, and it's effectively just made sure that it can write a test file and delete a test file from that folder. And that's what you expect to see, test successful. So we click next. I'm not going to turn on any of the email features to alert me because this is just a text platform and I can't see them anyway. I'll just give the job a name. Always a good idea. It's very difficult if you call all your jobs job. That job should be created any second. There we go. So to be doubly sure, let's run that job and watch what happens. So I'm going to run the job as a future statement. So I'm going to run it as next Monday. This is just allow us to create a bit of a folder structure that makes sense. Let's see what happens. So it's only a few megabytes of data, so hopefully this job will run through quite quickly. If it starts. There we go. So it's connected to the remote server. It's just doing a quick VSS snapshot of the source data, because these files could easily be open. I mean, in my scenario, they're just flat image files, but these could equally be local system files. So it's now backing up those files. Now, what you should see here is that the total size of data is what files are being copied as far as the source sees them. So the total size of those files. The size transferred is what's going over the wire. So there is some compression going on. A lot of these, well, all these files are actually images, so I don't expect a particularly high compression with images, but it is saving a bit of data purely based on the fact that it can compress that data on the wire. So we're almost there. So we've copied 191 files, a total of 14 megabytes of data, and about 13 was sent across It's now going to do a quick verification. We'll let that, and that should be done, and it'll create a report. While it's doing that, I'm just going to fast track this slightly, and I want to run this job again. Now you can run the job, hopefully it will finish by the time I get there, but if not, it would queue the job. I'm going to run it again, but this time I'm going to run it as a Tuesday, next Tuesday. So we'll hit run. Now the reason I just want to make things run a little bit quicker here, but what I want to show you here is without changing any of the source files, really it shouldn't need to move very much data at all. It should recognize that it's already got all those files. You see how the total size will be counting up, but the size transferred 0, oh slightly, there you go. It finished moving the files and then it needed to send a copy of the catalog, so there was actually a small amount of data purely just for the catalog file. So let it do its verification just to check a few files, and then it should be done. There we go. So if I now switch back to the Rsync server, just one final check. We can close that window. Let's have a look at what's actually been created. So I was backing up to a C backup folder. This is the root folder for these backups. So there's a copy of my BackupAssist catalogs. That's quite useful if you ever need to restore using BackupAssist and all is the destination. You can point BackupAssist to that folder and it will tell it what all of your backups contain. There's my Monday backup and there's my Tuesday backup. Now because it's using single instance store, the data on this drive is only equivalent to one set of that data. But in reality, it's it's got 2 folders. So over the 5 days, I've expected a folder for each day, and then it would start using the Monday folder again and start updating any changes since the last time it used that folder. The actual structure is exactly like the data that was backed up, and you can see the folder system. So it's quite nice using Rsync without encryption because you can get direct access to the file system that you've backed up. So if if all you've got is access to this Rsync server, you can immediately just pull files off the server as required. If we'd chosen encryption, then this data would look completely different. It'd be the same structure, but every file would be encrypted. And because every file would be different, then it would have to move all that data again. So that kind of concludes this quick demo. I do have a few minutes for any questions and answers you may have, so stick around to the end and I'm happy to answer those. Other than that, if you do want to get back to me at a later date, my email's neil@zensoftware.co.uk. Please feel free to join us. Speak to us on Twitter. We've got a very detailed blog where I'm always putting new articles up about all of our products, but quite a bit about BackupAssist. And if you haven't already, then click on the subscribe button that should be on your screen right now, and subscribe to all our YouTube videos. But other than that, I hope that's been useful.